My guest this week on the Crested Butte is Home podcast is Andy Eflin, and Andy was born the same year that Crested Butte Mountain Resort first opened. And not only that, but his dad, Dick Eflin, was one of the founders of Crested Butte. So we talk about that. We talk about growing up in Crested Butte in the 60s and the 70s, and then we talk about his later experiences running Eflin Sports at the base of the ski area. Eflin Sports later became Peak Sports, and that was owned by Vail. So he has a unique insight into Vail management as well. So I hope you enjoy the show, and as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you like to listen, and leave a review, and let's get on with the show then. Guest today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast is Andy Eflin. And Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born here in the Crested Butte, Gunnison Valley. Actually born at the Gunnison Hospital. Grew up in Crested Butte. I wasn't one of those people that didn't quite make it to Gunnison. I did make it to the hospital.
Okay.
So anyway, I kind of grew up in downtown Crested Butte on First and Sopris, first part of my life.
Okay.
And then moved out to the Lower Loop, right where the O'Neill's house was for quite a few years. Used to be called the Steakhouse.
Yeah.
Lived out there, and then lived up on the mountain in my high school years.
Okay.
And then after that, kind of moved on to college and so on and so forth.
And where'd you go to college?
I went down to Fort Lewis College, down Durango.
Okay.
So it was kind of funny because we got bused down to Gunnison from Crested Butte at the time. We got bused down to Gunnison for high school.
Yeah.
So after doing that for 4 years, I was wanting a little bit of a change and didn't really look at Western as an option at that point.
Probably not.
I was kind of like, I need to get out of town.
Yeah.
Need to, find new places and stuff like that. And that was just far enough away, but still close.
Yeah, and similar in a lot of ways in terms of size and
definitely
everything else. And awesome. Yeah. So what time period are we talking about growing up in Crested Butte then?
Well, I was born in 61. The ski area and I are exactly the same age, both born the summer of 1961.
Awesome.
My dad broke ground for the Crested Butte ski area in 61 as well. And so it's kind of interesting to say that you're the same age as the area, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So then I graduated high school here at Gunnison High School in 1980, and then went to Fort Lewis, got my bachelor's degree in business in 4 years from 80 to 84.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that must have been a busy time for your dad, having a kid and starting a ski area.
Oh, yeah. He had two kids, my brother
Right.
and I. So didn't have the big family, but he was... interesting thing was he wasn't even 30 years old yet, which is kind of frightening. He was just shy of 30.
Wow.
So quite a vision for a person that age.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Wow. So at this point, the ski area is just starting, and I don't know how much you remember then from back then. So, town was still a mining town, and it was literally starting as a ski town. So do you remember, you hear these stories of the old mining families versus the new ski bum hippies, whatever. Do you remember some of that growing up?
Oh, yeah. I remember a lot of it. We, since my family was involved in the resort, we spent a lot of time in the resort. Both my parents worked up there. And, even after my dad was no longer involved in the resort, because he was only involved for about 8 years, I think he and my mom both worked as ski instructors up there. So we were up there all the time.
Yeah.
But, it's always funny. I always tell a story how Karen Rogera, and that Rogera name has been around, Slavic name, mining family. Uh-huh. She and I were the only two people in our class for 3 or 4 years. So we were the, future to be class of 80. Well, actually, and that's not quite true because it would have been class of 79. But anyway, there was a few changes along the way there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So there you go. There was one mining kid and one skiing kid.
Exactly. In
your class of two.
The class of two. And the best thing was King of the Hill at lunchtime. We used to go out in the parking lot. They used to plow all the snow, And right now, what is the town hall was our school. We went kindergarten through 8th, when I, at least in my genre.
Yeah.
And they plow the snow into the middle of the parking lot, and we'd be climbing up that hill, playing King of the Hill. And then our teacher Doris Walker used to we get back into class, and this was probably 3rd and 4th. It was each class had 2 grades, so like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Okay.
And in I think that 3rd and 4th class, we'd get back into class, and she'd be like, "Okay, take the wet clothes off," and we'd be sitting there in our long underwear, for the afternoon. That's what we tried out. Nice. Which might not be acceptable in this day and age, but that's kind of how it was done back then.
Right. Well, it worked. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Are very many of those classmates from elementary school? Are any of them still really around the Gunnison Valley much? Or
I'm trying to think. Some obviously some people in front and behind me are definitely here.
Okay.
Your Shammy Somrax, and my teacher was Rudy Rosman. He was in the real estate business for quite a while. And I'm trying to think of actual classmates though. There are some folks, some like sisters and brothers that are still around.
Yeah.
I actually know a few more folks from high school that I went to high school with that are still hanging around, that have, built careers here in the valley and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but going back to, to elementary school, not quite as many that I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, not surprising, I guess, in a lot of ways, given all the changes that have occurred and everything else.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about Crested Butte back then, too. I mean, just in general. So, Elk was paved at that point, or not even that?
There's always that debate, and my answer is yes, Elk was paved when I was a kid, but nothing else was. It was pretty much dirt on the side streets. Right now, the big corner there where, trying to think what businesses are there. What used to be the Bakery Cafe, which is now Pita's in Paradise, and upstairs is Fister's Handworks and that kind of stuff. That was actually a gas station, when I was a kid. So it was just and in fact, I want to say it was a rundown and possibly even closed gas station, not far from there where the sunglass store and T-shirt store is Mountaintops. That was the post office. So that building had been remodeled into retail, but it originally was the post office. And Marlene Stadahar was there, at the front desk, doing the. She did that for probably 30 years. I don't even know how long.
Oh wow!
So that's another, mining name.
Sure.
Stadahars, or at least folks that have been around Crested Butte for a long time.
Yeah.
But there was, I think. My folks tell me that there was probably 300 people living in the town of Crested Butte the year I was born. So,
that's about right.
And if you look at my dad's slideshow, it's just amazing how small the trees are and things like that. It's just, there is no vegetation in downtown Crested Butte. It's like little tiny trees. The trees on my house, First and Sopris, were probably 3 or 4 feet tall, and now they're 50, 60 feet tall.
Sure.
Just these big giant pine trees, that have spent the last 50 years growing, So definitely a greener, prettier place now than it was back in the early 60s.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I'm sure all the surrounding forest was actually kind of just regrowing from having been cut down for mining and local log works and everything else. So.
Yep.
Huh. All right, well, let's go. So your dad was was the original owner of Crested Butte, along with one other.
One other, Fred Rice. That was his financial partner. And Fred Rice ended up being the, 75% owner, and my dad was the more kind of the worker partner, 25%. We kind of modeled Eflin Sports after that same sort of business plan when my dad and I started Eflin Sports back in June of 1990.
Okay.
But... Fred was. Both my dad and Fred were from Kansas, and that story goes on. I've told it before. I think I told your wife that story once
Probably.
before. Which is it's a good one, but it's too bad we didn't get it on film when my dad was still telling it, because that would have been cool. because he really remembered a lot of those names, whoever the Forest Service superintendent was, and,
all the people that were involved with starting it up.
Exactly. The guys that were building the original warming house and the guys that were building the original lifts. And we've got good friends that we've kind of, over the years, gotten to know that met at Western, and Tom and Polly Thompson. And Tom always tells the story how he worked for my dad clearing trails on Jokerville and International as a college student, and up there running a chainsaw in the summer clearing those original trails, which is kind of a crazy story.
Yeah. A little bit of a looser time, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just do it. I spent the summer clearing trees.
Yeah. No, I mean that was probably great work, especially at the time.
Yeah.
And
probably paid well.
Yeah. So, and I also so your dad designed much of the resort as well, as far as the trail layout and.
Yep, he was an architect by trade, and so he kind of drew up the trails, and they used to sit around in parties and try to come up with names, and came up with the names for Crystal, Twister, Jokerville, and of course when he was involved, it was mostly that original mountain.
Right.
Yet he had vision for the Paradise and East River and those other parts of the mountain,
which all came later.
They all came later, and and I don't even know how true this is, but he told me once that the Banks actually put a lift in at the ski resort, which would have been the original Keystone lift, which is now the Red Lady lift.
Sure.
So that was in between the time that my dad and Fred Rice owned the resort, and then it switched over to Fred. Fred bought my dad out, but in between that time and the time that the Callaways and the Waltons took over. And my dad said that, which kind of surprised me. I'm like, really? The Banks put in a lift? So
that doesn't...
It doesn't really...
all these stories from 10 years ago with the financial crisis, the Banks weren't putting things in. They would take things out.
Exactly. I need to go back to Martha Walton and try to ask that question, because
see if it's actually true.
Because Ralph's no longer with us either. But it'd be interesting to hear what her take on that is.
Yeah. Any good stories about some of these names that you mentioned? Do you know the origin of a couple of fun ones?
Of the trails?
Of the trails.
Yeah, well, the Jokerville was obviously named after the Jokerville mine,
sure.
The explosion, which was kind of traumatic. And, of course, you've seen some snowboarders slide down that thing in a traumatic fashion. One of the funniest stories that I have is back in the Eflin Sports days, I got contacted by Michael Keaton, and he was coming out to Crested Butte, and he came out for a few years in a row, and I think he even may have invested in some land. But he would come out and he would rent skis and or rent a locker from us. He usually actually had his own skis, but he would rent a locker. We had those lockers that we rented downstairs in the Eflin Sports space. And he'd bring his fancy OTA Vampires out, and those were his skis, and get them tuned up. And one time we were asking him, he and his manager were there, and we were kind of like, hey, do you mind if we go with, and he was like, sure, that's no problem, you can come with. And then one of the guys that worked for me asked if his son could come with. And so we go charging up the Queen, get to the top, start going down that upper triangle, and we get to the road that takes you over to Jokerville. And we're in that upper triangle zone, and Michael Keaton swerves one way, and this guy that works for me and his son swerves the other way, and they collide. And I mean, there's stuff going everywhere. And I'm standing on the Jokerville Road, the road above Jokerville, and they come octopusing down, hit me, knock me off my feet.
Oh, wow.
And he gets up, and he's just all kind of nervous and stuff, and he looks at me, and his glasses are broken. He's like, just keep that kid away from me. Just keep that kid away from me. And I think it was the same trip where he went to the Timberline restaurant, and when he was walking in the restaurant, bumped his head on the sign because the wind was blowing and the sign wasn't as high as it could be. I think that's the last that he ever spent time in Crested Butte.
He decided it was a little too dangerous of a place to...
A little dangerous over here. And then I'm trying to think. Twister, of course, we know that was named after, because back in the early 60s, the dance, the Twister, was popular.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, they named that one. International was originally called Downhill. It was just called Downhill, but then it was maybe its official name was International, but it was they were trying to get international competitors to race that downhill.
Sure.
And that's how the name International came around. So it was tall enough and long enough to be classified in the World Cup or whatever. I don't think they ever had that size of a race in Crested Butte, but
no, they had the Nationals.
The Nationals
for a few. I don't know how many years, but at least a couple. And
as a kid, I remember them taking the adult guys all the way up to practically the patrol shack, which was the upper terminal of the old gondola.
Yeah,
and starting them from up there, which was pretty crazy.
And it's steep on those first pitches. I mean, they would have been moving.
And then you hit that road, and then you go across the road and then drop again.
Yeah. No, it's actually a great course. It'd be nice if they could get a race of some sort that was pretty big there, but.
Never know.
Yeah,
things are changing.
Yeah, we'll get there. We're gonna get there.
Okay.
Anyway, okay. So your dad moves on from the resort around 1970-ish or whatever,
late 60s.
And what? So what do you guys do next? What was the next bit?
Well,
like?
Again, I'm a kid at this point, and my dad is, he is working at this point. His partner Fred bought him out, but couldn't pay him in cash, so. Paid him in land, and so then my dad, was working at selling lots for many years. He had, I want to say, 15 to 20 business sites, and probably 3 to 5. Say it again. 15 to 20 home sites, and 3 to 7 business sites that he tried selling over the next 20 years.
Okay.
But along that way, my dad. Bumped into Eula Erickson, who is from near Oklahoma City, and she owned what was the steakhouse.
Okay.
And so early in the, probably early 70s, my folks bought the steakhouse.
Okay.
And they started continued the steakhouse with the same recipes that Eula had started. Great restaurant. People remember the place. My parents were there. They owned that place for, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 years.
Wow. It's an amazing location for anyone who doesn't know. So that's the house that you see off the lower loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the first right.
Yeah.
The first house to the right. And it was actually built as a water as a hydro power plant.
Oh, wow.
And so the shell of that thing was concrete, and it was built as a hydro plant, and it was never completed. They were going to generate power out of the Slate River. But it was turned into a restaurant. It had these beautiful big windows that faced the butte.
Yeah.
They had awesome hummingbird feeders out there, and the hummingbirds would be out there. My brother and I loved that place because we used to sneak around in the restaurant and stuff. And when the lady that came to clean the restaurant in the mornings, we'd be sneaking around the restaurant, and we had a couple cats, and it was always funny watching those cats go bucking through the restaurant, and then they'd be chasing each other, and they'd slide and slam up against the counters and things like that. But we lived in the back part of the house, which was never changed or was not damaged, and you probably have heard the story of what happened to that restaurant. But Pauline Saya was the lady that did the cleaning there, and she has a daughter that still is here in Gunnison. Married Rick Rixford, and they have the Western Slope Fire Safety.
Oh, okay.
So they do your fire extinguishers
and
stuff like that. But her mom worked at the restaurant, worked for us, I think, the whole time we had the restaurant. Great lady. She was very patient with my brother and I. And,
had to be.
Yeah. And she was unfortunately in the building when it exploded. What happened is my folks sold that restaurant, and they the new owners expanded it. They put a bar. They added a small bar. Mm-hmm. And one morning there was the smell of gas in the building, and the local utility folks came in, and they unfortunately tried to air the place out. And there was a little pilot light out in the entryway, and she was in the place working when it happened. And one of the two biggest explosions probably in Crested Butte. The other was the bank.
The bank, yeah.
Yep. So anyway, pretty sad moment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But we back to that restaurant. We have some good stories. My brother and I, because in the winter my parents ran that place. There'd be tour buses that would come out, with groups of folks, and we had networks of walkways and snow caves behind the big snow piles, and we'd be, watching the tourists and, throwing snowballs or whatever.
Oh, of course.
And then on the way to school, since we were a ways out of school, our favorite thing to do was when the county plow came out and he would plow and he would turn around in the steakhouse parking lot, we'd go running with our lunch boxes and grab onto the back of the county plow and skitch back into town.
No, nice.
Skitch back into town.
Very nice.
And that was a great plan until my brother's toes got caught in the cattle guard and sent him sailing. Ooh. And we were like, maybe this is more dangerous than we first originally thought.
Yeah, that could hurt a lot going down on the cattle crate.
But that was a good time. Probably from the time I was 6 till the time I was 12, and we would be ice skating on the beaver trails in the fall when there was when they weren't covered with snow. And we'd be following these beaver trails, and we used to have skate parties with our friends out at Nicholson Lake.
Oh yeah, so I bet.
It's nice. Interesting. Now I run an ice rink, and that was my first exposure to ice skating was Nicholson Lake. Or not Nicholson, I'm sorry, Peanut Lake.
Peanut. Okay.
Peanut Lake.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, let's take a really quick break. On the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute this week, I thought we would talk about ski and ski out properties since it's almost ski season. And if you go to my website, which is CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com, and then you click on the property tab, you'll find another link for ski in, ski out, and that's going to show you all the different neighborhoods that offer that type of property, as well as the condominium complexes that are ski in, ski out. So if you've been looking for a property like that, or if you just already own one and are curious what maybe some of your neighbors are selling for, that's an easy place to go. Hopefully that is helpful for you. And again, my name is Frank Consella, and CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com is the website. And let's get back to the show. You went off to school, did some things for, about 10 years, and then you came back?
Yep. I graduated college, started looking around through the state of Colorado for work, employment.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to be in the industry, so I was looking for some sort of a way to get into management. And I went and interviewed with a lot of people. Snug Company in Vail. Interviewed at Crested Sports with Keith Van Velkenberg. Interviewed quite a few places, and then went up to Steamboat Springs and interviewed with Sports Stalker.
Uh-huh.
And those guys were on a progressive growth pattern, and they had a management training program. And so that was the one that seemed like the right fit.
Sure.
And the other folks, they were super cordial, and they were like, "Hey, we'd love to give you a job, but there's people that have been here a long time. It could take you a while to get into a position or whatever." And so I went up to Steamboat. Had to wait till the winter came around, so I worked for the industrial company in Steamboat Springs, which
what do they do?
Well, they just build giant hotels or condominiums.
Oh, okay.
I was on the Eagle Ridge crew, I think, and I was on the concrete crew, and I spent the summer pouring concrete, and
every day concrete.
I mean, we were doing a lot of concrete, building giant forms that were 20 feet tall, and securing them and that kind of a thing, and wearing a hard hat and trying to dodge the crane and stuff like that. I was never so thankful to get that job in the ski industry.
I bet. You decided that construction was not for you then.
Well, and especially when the foreman said, "Hey, you're one of the best employees we've had. I'll give you $3 an hour more than what you're making right now." And I said, "Sorry, I got my job lined up." And I started at a meager salary at the Sports Stalker. Kind of trained in the Gondola Square building or store, and that was an amazing experience. Doing mass mounts of 200-300 pairs of skis, having goggle mornings there in the Gondola Square in Steamboat, where we would sell $40,000 worth of goggles in 2 hours
because it was snowing so hard or whatever.
Just snowing in Steamboat, just dumping, And it's funny, when I moved to Steamboat, I used to tell people, "I'm bringing my snorkel. I'm moving to Steamboat. I'm gonna need that snorkel." And my first winter there, I was all depressed because there wasn't much snow, and we opened up the resort for Thanksgiving, and it was pretty lean, and there was bacon strips up on the hill, and you could see brown here and there, and it was kind of disappointing. But as soon as the crowd left after Thanksgiving, it started snowing, and we had one of those dumps where it snowed like 8 feet in 3 days, and literally I was thinking, I wish I had my snorkel now. Coming down, skiing down sticks, or one of those trails where you'd ski 100 yards, stop for breath, and then ski another 100 yards and stop for more air, and it was pretty amazing.
Nice.
Skied with some really good skiers up there, some guys that were nationally ranked bump skiers and things like that. They were actually managers for the Sports Stalker at the time.
Okay.
Dean the Machine and Jeff Evans and some of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Leifer was my mentor. He was my immediate supervisor, or my kind of the regional supervisor, and he was a great guy. Taught me a lot about the business. And within a year and a half, I had my own store there in Steamboat, and then I ran that for another 5 years or so.
Nice.
So I was up in Ski Time Square. I had the Ski Time Square store for Sports Stalker.
Okay.
Had some great customers, some people that were awesome, and I even later interviewed with some of those folks when I was trying to find some different options in my life.
Uh-huh.
Went out to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and interviewed with a company, and out to Omaha and interviewed with the Union Pacific. Yeah. So, but they all saw me coming, and they were like, "This guy is not going to be able to live in the Midwest. This guy is not going to be able to live in Chattanooga."
No. So instead, you ended up, along with your dad, starting Eflin Sports, which later became Peak Sports,
right?
And is now, what do they call it? CB something.
Yeah. So my dad, called me and said, "You want to be in the skiing? Want to be in the business together?" And I said, at this point, I had learned a lot, and I'd been tuning skis, I'd been selling skis, I'd been mounting skis. I pretty much knew the game, and so we started Eflin Sports back in June of 1990.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. And then, like I said, we'll skip some of that.
Yeah.
So it becomes Peak Sports, which was originally Ken Gart of Gart Brothers. But then Vail bought them out. So you're one of the few people in this valley who has worked for Vail, basically.
Yep, I have.
So what was it like working for Vail?
I worked for Vail for basically 14 years. It was it didn't seem exactly like Vail Resorts when we started, because we were 55% owned by Vail Resorts, and then the balance 45% owned by SSV, Specialty Sports Venture.
Okay.
And that still had a lot of Tom and Ken Gart influence.
Okay. And
those guys were fun. We had some great manager trips, manager meetings and such, and they were good to work for, and sharp businessmen, and still
obviously.
are. Yeah. And then as we evolved and became more. Over the time, I think after a certain amount of time, then Vail Resorts owned 75% of SSV, and I just remember in my last 4 years, maybe 5 years, 4 years probably, we were told that Vail Resorts now owns 100% of SSV, and as far as it's funny, like working for Vail, there was no. They were pretty serious. No fooling around, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are shops in town that, it was okay for certain things to happen in the back shop and things like that. And Vail was very straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But again, they had to be, because they had 280 stores.
Sure.
And again, if somebody were to get hurt or something to go wrong, they're just a target, for a lawsuit.
Sure.
So they, working for them was, pretty cut and dry, but it was good. They were good to their people, I felt. We did get good training from those folks. They sent us all over the state, and wherever we went, they took good care of us. I used to laugh at the per diem because I thought it was pretty minuscule, because try to go to Telluride and eat 3 meals on $25 a day, They
don't have a Taco Bell there that I'm aware of.
Or Aspen or Vail.
Right.
But they were constantly evolving and making the machine better, if you will. So you were constantly learning things. Whether it be a new way to evaluate your employees, or a new way to sell, or whatever. So you were constantly having to kind of improve your own skills. And so for those reasons, it was fun working there because it kind of kept you on your toes.
Kept learning. You weren't just doing the same thing year in, year out.
Exactly. And you were constantly learning new things. Very financially driven, so you got to,
Sure.
you as a business. I mean,
they're a publicly owned company. They've got stockholders to answer to.
Exactly. So as a store manager, you were under scrutiny as far as how your business was run, how your payroll was spent, and those kinds of things, and the numbers had to make sense.
Okay.
So you had to watch a lot of that.
Yeah.
When I left them, basically what happened, and this is the funniest thing because it's a full circle, but. Basically, the lease that my dad and I negotiated when we started that business ran out after 20 years, and so at this point, CBMR owns the building, and CBMR wants that 6,300 square feet for themselves.
It's prime real estate.
Prime real estate. One of the, as Tom Gart said, or Ken Gart said, one of the best locations in Colorado. Sure. And those guys wanted that space back, so they did not renew our lease.
Yeah.
And but Vail was good to me. They offered me a position in some other places. The two were Breckenridge and Park City, but my wife and I felt that wasn't a good fit for us. We really loved the Gunnison Valley, so we opted not to go that direction. And they were again gracious and gave me a nice severance package. And we kind of ended our working
ended on a good
relationship.
Good note.
Yeah, but ended on a good note. And of course, I had busted myself up snowboarding, and so I was in this boot, and my ankle was messed up, and I broke the one bone you never want to break, and all that. But so it was an interesting end of the story. But yeah.
Well, knowing what you now know then about Vail, and now they own Crested Butte, and comparing that to what, in your case, is literally a mom and pop ski area.
Right, literally. Yeah.
So what do you think? Is this good? Is this bad?
It's the mountain community is such a what's the word? Fragile environment because as a local, you want to be able to afford to live in the place that you love, and as the real estate and as things go up, and they will, and as a place like Vail buys it, it just becomes that much more popular, and that's the tough one, the double-edged sword, it's expensive to live there, and so the folks that want to live there have a hard time.
Yeah.
But they will bring some things that'll be good, when you have problems with machines that you need fixed, and you need more machines to groom the mountain, and you need those kinds of things. They have the kind of horsepower to get that kind of stuff done.
Sure.
They'll hopefully do some great things with the retail and the food and beverage there in Mount Crested Butte as well.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I've seen spaces on the mountain there that I just thought these things should just be thriving. Awesome spots,
right?
And yet they're sort of very middle of the road, if you will.
Yeah,
you can
think it's right above Peak Sports would be a good example.
That'd be a good example.
Peak 66 should be packed each and every afternoon.
Exactly. And to do that one right, or the little Hefe space as you walk through the courtyard, how that shouldn't be the most awesome little spot to hang out, and a place like Crested Butte should have more than one place to hang out, right?
Right.
So anyway, there's lots of improvement that can be done there, and I have no doubts that they will make some good steps in that direction.
Yeah. What do you think your dad would think if he was around to give his 2 cents?
I've been asked that question a bunch of times, and my dad was pro development. He had to be. He started a ski area. It was kind of like having a child. You want to see your child grow. And so I think he would be positive about what's happening, and certainly if I was involved up there more than I am now, he would really be positive and be looking forward to that. But things like maybe a new lift down the backside. With new owners like this, those are the kind of things that could actually happen. I was fortunate enough to take one of the tours down the backside of the mountain where that new lift could run, and it was amazing.
Sure.
Some of the patrollers, Buck and those guys, took us down in there, and it was incredible. Really, really cool terrain, and if that could happen, that would make it'd be just that much more fun. And
Yeah, no,
how that mountain already is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and a lot of that isn't our type of fun. The people who are expert skiers, a lot of that is actually good intermediate terrain with great views and a lot of sunlight, and people will enjoy it. I think for sure if they do go back there.
Yep.
Any other changes you'd like to see at the resort if you were in charge?
Changes. Yeah, no, that's an interesting question there. I always felt like close-in parking would be good. Obviously, covered parking. Hey, you couldn't go wrong with that. Of course, it's all I'm sure going to come with a price. Yeah, you're going to have to pay to park or whatever. I think some of those buildings that maybe the Mullers, had talked about might be a nice addition to the base area for sure.
Yeah.
Like the Cimarron building that never happened, and it kind of left us an ice skating rink sitting up there.
Yeah.
But
or putt now.
Putt now. I mean, that could be improved upon for sure. Of course, love to see a great rec center or art center or something to help make Mountain Crested Butte, a really cool spot or a cooler spot, if you will. And I know that they've been fighting for years to make that happen, and that would be great to have some of those things happen.
Yeah, yeah. Mountain Crested Butte's interesting when you look at. You can even just look at the restaurant scene there. It's 20 years ago, how many restaurants were there, or 30 years ago, maybe even there were far more restaurants there in the 80s or 90s.
Right.
Than there are today, which is really strange, and it'd be nice to see more going on up there in terms of that kind of thing. Not that people need to not go to town, because town is awesome too, but it'd be nice to have some other things going on.
Yeah, and I'm sure town is very busy as it is, and it'd be nice to have more options. So if you are staying on the mountain, you wouldn't have to necessarily go downtown. It would be good for business all the way around.
I'm a Mount Crested Butte resident. In July, I'm so excited that the Avalanche is there, and I can walk in and sit down, because I'm not probably going to try it in town.
Exactly.
But anyway. Well, all right. Well, let's switch subjects. So these days, you Gunnison Parks and Rec, and so what are you doing these days?
Well, I was busted up with the ankle, and finding out that we no longer had our lease and that I was moving on, and at the time I really couldn't think about too much more than this ankle that I had, but we were taking a family vacation to visit my folks down in Florida, and I was like, I just need to probably start filling out some applications, and I saw something the city of Gunnison was advertising for a position, so I filled out the application and sent it in, put together a resume. Hadn't put a resume together in 30 years. And it didn't take long, and I had made the short list, 3 folks, and went in for an interview and got the job. So I am currently a facility manager and event coordinator. So my winters, I manage the ice rink down here in Gunnison.
Sure.
And then in the summer, I help put on the events in the city of Gunnison, and we do events. We help a lot of folks out with big events like the Growler and like the Gunnison River Festival.
Okay.
We do some on our own, like the 4th of July. All of that we do ourselves. And then we do a gun show, and we do a triathlon, and it's been a lot of fun. When the first 3 years I was working for the city and doing the events, we did a chainsaw carving event, which has now gone away, which is a shame, because it was actually running that event. It was funny. My staff and I were just like, "Wow, that was the best event." It was just so fun,
Really, yeah.
And I kept saying that this thing needs to be a standalone event, otherwise it's going to go away. And that is, people need to come to town for the chainsaw carving. It was always put on in conjunction with the car show. And that's already a big event, and a ton of people come to town for the car show. But yeah, so it's it's an expensive event, to put that thing on.
Sure.
Trying to get those carvers into town and all that. But it was fun. It was a pretty cool thing.
I got an event for you.
Okay.
I keep pushing this one.
Okay.
So I'm thinking mid-January, downtown Gunnison, ski joring.
Yes.
It makes so much sense for this town and this town's, combine the ranching and the skiing, and it's a slow time of year.
I agree, and
it'd be perfect. Someone needs to pull the trigger on it.
It's already been talked about. I've been in I was in 5 or 6 meetings this year already about exactly that, and then it kind of fizzled. It's always hard getting the right people involved for a long enough period of time to make something like that happen. It is a pretty big event, but I think you're right. I think that would be a great event for our town.
For anyone who doesn't know, by the way, ski touring is that crazy thing where you get pulled behind a horse and you get these rings. It's pretty fun to watch.
And go over jumps.
And you go over jumps, but you're doing it. You're getting pulled by a horse like down the street. So,
right, going 25 miles an hour.
Yeah. So the majority of your life has been either in Crested Butte or in Gunnison. So what do you think about the two towns and their relationship, and where do you think that's at now and headed to and all that kind of thing?
I've always seen that friction there, and I've always felt it a little bit. Coming from Crested Butte, coming from a family that was largely business, business involved. It's funny because I didn't see a lot of difference, because my dad went to the bank in Gunnison, and we did our shopping in Gunnison just like people do today.
Yeah.
But there is that friction there, and I think people in Gunnison feel it, especially when folks from Crested Butte come down, and let's say they're very wealthy or whatever, and they're demanding service or this kind of a thing, then they kind of have this, those are the Crested Butte folks, but there is that bit of friction there, but I honestly think folks seem to get along pretty well this day and age, and we certainly, like through the Parks and Recs department, we see a lot of collaboration. Obviously, I mean, half the kids in Crested Butte are on the Gunnison team, and half the kids in Gunnison are on the Crested Butte team when it comes to hockey and things like that. So it's a great gap. It bridges that gap.
Sure. And
certainly with the adult leagues, I mean, I'm seeing it a lot in the hockey. That this major influence from Crested Butte coming down and playing hockey in Gunnison, and those walls seem to be very small at times.
Yeah.
At other times, you hear people talk, and you're kind of like, but I think as when you look at it in a little bit larger scale, I mean, we all definitely need to work together to make this valley, hum, if you will, or because again, certain people might think that that they like it just the way it is, but I grew up in a time my folks didn't have a lot of tons of money and things like that, and we were encouraging folks to come to Crested Butte, and people with families, they need a way to live in this valley, so you can't just be like, hey, we're here and nobody else can come, because we want to keep it the way it is. We're fortunate. We're super fortunate that it's a little bit harder to get to Crested Butte.
Yeah.
It's kept it fairly consistent, and yet we see that push, from the Front Range, pushing in and driving prices up and things like that. But, it's all a part of it. And if you don't have a little of that, then you're probably not going to have places for people to work and a way for people to survive in this valley.
Sure, exactly. That's how it works. So, well, let's start to wrap it up a little bit. So the Gunnison Valley is still home for you. So why do you choose to still live here? I
really like it here. It's a question of why. It's just, I guess it's part of, I love what the valley has to offer. You've got some of the best mountain biking that you can find, and I've biked in other places, and there is great biking all over this place.
Sure.
But in contrast to a place like Telluride, for example, where the trails are super steep, and a lot of the Eider Creek stuff and these different areas. I mean, it's hard to get up there and on it.
Yeah.
Not to say they don't have good mountain biking, because they do. But here we have awesome mountain biking, and I do love mountain biking. I do love the snow in the winter. I figure if you're gonna be in a place where it gets cold, it's fun to be able to go out and do something with that cold. Whereas if you're back in the Midwest, it's going to get cold anyway.
Sure.
And you're going to be sitting in your house wishing you could be doing something.
Well, of course, it gets gray there too. They don't.
Right. I've heard those things, and see, I don't know that, and I don't think I want to know that.
Right.
And it's like in the summer, same thing. It gets so warm that then you're wanting to stay inside because of air conditioning, And
or the only thing you can do is hang out on a lake, or
right. So we just love it here. We do have a boat. We're boaters. We go out to Blue Mesa. We do camp out there a lot. We do a lot of boat only camping. So we'll boat out to spots where there's nobody around and make our own.
I've never done that.
Make our own campsite. Sure. It's awesome, especially in places like West Elk Creek, where you go right up into the wilderness and you are camping basically in the wilderness, and you can't get there by car, you can't get there by trail,
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
And so it's a pretty awesome spot, and not far to the big city, and it's a great spot to live.
All right.
So
all right. If someone wanted to learn, we didn't talk a ton about it, but if someone wanted to learn more about Jorgensen and your job, what's the website? Where can they best learn about programs going on there?
It's pretty easy. Just go to type in City of Gunnison in your web browser, and you'll get to the web page. And the web page is pretty good, and it'll have all the departments of the city. You just go to the Parks and Recs department, and you can hone in pretty quick. The Parks Department does do a lot of programs, and you can certainly always just call the community center, because those guys can tell you all about the programs. We do a big program guide several times a year, which is good as well. And I think on the website you can definitely find the information you need to if you're interested in a program, whether it be soccer, football, lacrosse, swimming lessons, daycare, that we actually at our pool do lessons on how to be like a babysitter, that kind of a thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and they have they do first aid classes through the pool. They do a lot of great stuff, and then they do a lot of fun sort of regional oriented events, things like Fright Night they just had, and
nice.
Which is great for kids, and all these events. I mean, we'll have 400 kids show up and do an awesome thing. One of the events that I helped put on, it's largely under my belt, is the fishing derby. And I think
I've heard of that.
Yeah, the last year I think we had 350, 400 kids out there, and we're giving them free fishing poles, and we got people cooking 300 hot dogs. Everything's with the Parks Department, it's always a bargain. It's a very affordable type of thing. So
nice.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff.
Very cool.
But yeah.
Anything else I should have asked that I didn't, that you want to get off your chest or something?
No, I got stories, but I'll save those for a different time.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And then final question, who else should I interview?
I would think John Koch might be an interesting person to talk to, the Iceman. So yeah, I think you ought to talk to him. He owns Gunnison Ice.
Okay.
He also is a snowmaker up at Mount Crested Butte, and he sharpens skates at the ice rink. And he's a really interesting guy, so I think John Koch might be a good person to talk to. The other one that comes to mind, just because I think highly of him, is a guy by the name of Jim Seitz. And Jim Seitz does hand-hewn aspen furniture. He actually built an entire room for Joe Cocker at his house over in Crawford.
Oh, okay.
And he's a super nice guy, and he's got some fun stories, that guy. He went to school at Western when it was the normal school. And, and he bought a house way back in the day, which people would be probably shocked for what he paid for that house, but he lives in one of those Victorian houses on South Main, and he is a really interesting guy. His wife worked for the Gunnison Valley Family Physicians for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the two people I can think of.
That sounds good. I'm sure you could think of 20 more, but
right.
But no, that's a good start. I like that. So when do you have the normal school? Do you have any idea when that became Western State College?
I don't know when it switched over, because I talked briefly about Tom and Polly that met at Western, and so it wasn't the normal school at that point. So it must have been 5 years earlier than that, and I don't know that I can pinpoint when they went to school there, but if he was clearing trails on the mountain as a student at Western, it would have had to have been, right there in the early 60s.
Okay.
So I would say, maybe mid-50s is when it switched from the normal school to... I'll bet you Dwayne Vandenbush could tell you.
I bet you he could, and he's actually, he's definitely got to be on my list. In fact, I could probably just interview him like 10 times in a row.
Yeah, he's got a lot of info. Yeah, but he could probably tell you when it switched from the normal school to Western.
That's funny. So that name changed, and now it just changes every 2 to 3 years, I guess.
Yeah, just keep it changing.
Yep.
Western Colorado now, I believe.
Yep. Or, no, Western Colorado University.
Western Colorado University.
Yeah, they stayed out. But anyway. Well, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. And,
good talking with you.
Hopefully we'll see you up on the slopes this year.
Well, I hope to see you in the backcountry, and I hope I get to go on a trip with you at some point again in the near future.
No, that would be good for sure. Yeah. Thanks.